and then you've produced this beautiful coffee, and then someone just burns it in the last minute just before going into the cup. All that enriching processes, and someone just burns it just before it goes in a cup. That's why we're from here going to the kitchen and talking about burning the coffee, and let's brew some coffee to make sure that you get your best coffee from harvest to cup.
Forget about sustainability. You want to enrich ecosystems.
Every bean is equipped to live a positive, energetic balance.
Keep it pruned.
We are cultivating abundance.
Not a problem to cut down trees. The problem is not planting them.
Hey, what's up, Agroforestry Academy crew? Welcome back to another video. Yeah, check it out. It's coffee harvest time. That means it's coffee video time. Let's get on with it. We've done it, last year where we spoke about, when the coffee harvest time come around, we spoke about how to harvest and how we prune them. So I'm going to very quickly run through that again. Just putting it in other words, and we've got some new viewers checking this stuff out. And we're going to make it a little bit more interesting this year, where we're going to, talk about what happens after we harvest, how we dry our coffee, the importance of all of that, and all the way through to, let's brew a coffee together. Why not, share some of the coffee brewing expertise that we have. And so, if you're ready, or maybe you're not a coffee producer, but you want to brew your coffee, fast forward the video, and we'll get into that soon. So yeah, beautiful Arabica. Yeah, coffees. We're here. It's 1,250 meters above sea level, so very good conditions for coffee. It's nice and chilled. Here in Brasilia, we've got very uniform rain, right? We have rain, like 5 months of the year, 6 months of the year, and then we've got drought, 5-6 months of the year as well. So it's very uniform, very defined rain season, very defined drought season. That makes it really easy for us coffee producers when it comes down to harvesting, because it's very uniform how the flower, the flowering formation, when that first humidity comes after, at the end of the drought, you get that first humidity, then, that information where, the leaves, they detect that humidity and they say, oh baby, it's time to flower now. So for us here, it's in about, late August, early September, and then the rain comes and all the flower, gets, blossoms, uniform, all at once. That means we get a very uniform harvest. We have experience where we get some quality coffees elsewhere where it's raining kind of on and off all year. That means, these people having to go ahead and they do like 8, 9, 10 harvests a year, because it's just flowering all year long, and then you got beans maturing all year long. So these people have to go like hand pick only the mature beans throughout the year. So that makes it, quite expensive and all of that. So here we do, just a two-time harvest. We harvest one time, and then we're able to harvest about 85% of the beans. And obviously there's a little bit of green, that just a little bit of the, so you just leave it for another 30 days, and then you come back and do the second harvest. That rest, those little green beans that stayed back, but usually it's like, certain areas, certain sections of the farm, might present, this set of plants has not matured yet. So it's not even like in one plant you get mixed green and red. It's like, in a certain region, where in a certain few plants, you leave those to harvest later. So it's really simple. I'm not having to pick, and I'm able to go ahead with my preferred harvesting pruning technique that, is all in one. So let's get on with that. But just before we do, check out the message that's so important to me and you. So guys, just very quickly, if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do that now. All right, it's free. Make that button gray and make my day. Follow us and be the first to know when the new content's out. And if you appreciate this video, smash that like button and help us reach more people so others can too learn about agroforestry. And without any further ado, let's get rolling with today's content. All right, so that's what it's all about, supporting the channel to keep us producing more videos. All right, so don't be shy. Okay, so check it out. This is how I love to do it. You see here, we got our coffee beans. All right, and it's produced in this stalk all the way up to the tip, you know. Let's say here we can judge that if it's coming from the main stalk of the plant to the tip of this branch, so this length here, what we like to say is that once the bean has produced, once this branch has produced 70% of the branch, then, you know, I'd rather just prune it off. Okay, so check it out what I mean by that. So if I'm talking about from the beginning there towards the end, and I measure that over there, I'm looking at about, this is probably produced about 80%, and I probably got about 20% of this tip which has not produced yet. So most of, you know, the stalk has already produced, and I just like, you know, doing the heavy pruning, being really radical with that. I'm really not up for waiting around another year where, you know, where this is already produced once, it's not going to produce again. Therefore, you know, next year I'll be producing 20 in this 20% here, which didn't produce this year. So it's a much smaller harvest. And when you think, you know, that this information needs to travel throughout the whole stalk to get here, you know, it's just not efficient enough. We see booming harvests in the initial stage of that coffee. You know, people with a 3-4 year harvest is the most beautiful harvest, and after that you never really see that kind of boom again. I know in conventional there's all sorts of other pruning methods, you know, 10 years, you know, every 3 years, but they're different techniques. This technique here, I cut it all out, you know, all the way. I'm really radical every year. Every year I'm radical with the pruning, and we remove that stalk that's already been productive. Why that in 3-4 years of your coffee you get the best harvest? Because it's that first boom, and in the first boom you get that whole stalk worth of harvest, and then after that, that stalk never produces the same again. And at the tip, at the top where the new branches are, you get nice harvest as well. But you know, what we want is a constant information of new shoots, new booming shoots. So I like to keep it all fresh, all new every year. So check it out. I mean, let's just get on with it. Maybe you can understand it better once I get on with it. So I'm gonna actually remove that. Okay, so check it out. It's mature. It's, you know, it's some of it, none of it's actually dry, but it's really mature. So we like to keep it like really nice and mature, just get the most amount of juice. There's a few missing here because this one's here is near my house, and it's with my son Bruno. He loves coming and sucking on the pulp of the fruit. So there's a few of them missing there, but that's, you see, so if you measure it like that, do you agree with me that 80% of the stalk is already being productive, and that 20% there, it's not worth hanging around for if I prune this down, and then I can invest all my information on the new shoots above that. So I'm gonna lay that there. All right, so let's look at another example. Already produced. All right, let's look at another example. I'm gonna be really radical, you know. So anything close to 70%, I'm removing already. All right, and some of these new shoots that haven't produced 70%, then I'm just gonna hand harvest those and leave that branch there, so we can, you know, harvest next year the remainder of that branch when we will then be removing that. Very, very few, practically nothing there. So this is the deal, you know, I keep the radical prune, okay, always lifting the skirt on that. And then down here, what I'm going to show you now, I'm going to get this camera. All right, so you know, we've been lifting the skirt, it's getting taller and taller. It's almost like at the moment where if I had to harvest, you know, what's up there, I couldn't harvest it no more. So we're preparing the next, you know, the sprouts from the bottom. We're already preparing them from last year already, you know, from 2 years ago, whatever, to replace them. So it's a big cycle. So we're lifting the skirt, and when that's too tall, we've already got, you know, the reshoot coming up from underneath. And then, you know, it's always new fresh shoots. So at the top there, at the tip of the canopy, always new shoots. And then when that's too high and you can't carry on that process, you've already set up the bottom with all new shoots, okay? So what I like to do, I like to leave up to 2 new trees down here. So, you know, I might have already selected 2 last year, but there's always new resprouts anyway, so I've got to come back and make sure that there is only 2, you know, 2 new shoots coming from here, and then, you know, we can talk about that in a sec. Let me get on with this. So there's some shoots popping up from the middle there. So I've left 2, 1, and then a second one down here. All right. Okay. So I mean, I've done experiments in the past where I've left, you know, 2, 3 shoots worth of, you know, the coffee plant, you know, with 2, 3 shoots, and it's not worked out. Why? Because I wasn't using this radical pruning system. If I have 2 shoots and it's full plants, then it's just too much, you know, there's not enough energy to go around. But if I have 2 plants and both of them are radically pruned, it's almost like I've got a third and a third of a plant, which adds up to 2/3. So I could even, by this maths, have up to 3 shoots, and that would total to 1 plant. All right, if I'm using the radical pruning system, I could have 3 shoots, considering I'll only have the third of the new canopy, then I don't have all that waste underneath it. That means 1 plant can support 3, you know, main branches that will become, you know, their own little canopies. So that's how you can justify, you know, leaving 2 shoots. So right at the moment I got 1 at the top, 1 over here, and another little baby already underneath that. So it's like multi-layering, do you know what I'm saying? So that's really cool. So what's happening, this one here at the top is actually going to be quite tall for me next year. So I'll just come with a little saw, and I actually just saw it down there, and that will be the end of that, and I'll just harvest that, you know, just the full head. I'll just harvest that full head, you know, and so next year we will have 1 more harvest at the top, and then, you know, so surely already this baby here is already going to be producing fruit. It's already going to flower when September comes, and we're going to have flowering up there, we're going to have flowering up here, down here. So we're going to have a nice information already of new branches down here, new branches up there, because remember, you know, it's at the top, it's in the old plant, but it's at the new branches because it's always at the top of the canopy, new sprouts at the top, you know, it grows up and always new shoots at the top. So I just love that, and you know, since I've done that, it's just become clean and simple, pretty easy to manage really, because you're not having to come back and harvest and then prune. It's just a one-time job every year, keeps everything fresh. All right, so then your harvest is looking a little bit like this. And I take that box inside, you know, and then I can already, you know, rip the coffees out, you know, onto the table or where we're going to be doing that drying process. So I'm going to now invite you to our drying process facility. Improvised. All right, so like I was saying, it's all about the slow dry. So it really, you know, that flavor really sits into the bean. All those sweetness and all that sugars from the pulp of the fruit really sits into that grain, you know. So it's all about the slow dry. I wouldn't even worry if you start getting that kind of initial kind of mold, you know, that white kind of around the skin. You know, obviously you want to mix it up every day, come through. Depends how thick you have it. If you have it very thick, you want it a few times a day, be turning it over. But I've got it nice and thin here, so it's basically okay. Every so often we move it around and we get that initial fermenting stage. This is interesting, about, the drying processes and the fermenting and things like that. I'm not going all out gourmet. Like my coffee it's already got notes. It got 86 points when I wasn't doing specific drying. So we can imagine we can reach higher points than that, above 85. This is called special coffee, and it sells as special coffee already at special prices or whatever. But you talk about championship winning coffee. We talk about some of our friends that do the most they can to get that very best coffee. And then when you talk to them, it's like, so what about the variety, and what kind of varieties you'll be looking at? And what they turn to you and say, obviously the Arabica coffee, and but not really into the variety of Arabica. What variety? It's more down to the care, the process after the harvest. Obviously, with agroforestry, we're hitting new notes here. We've got new levels of sugars. People, which professional tasters, people in championships, they're having to learn how to evaluate this kind of organic coffee, because it's new, unknown notes to the commercial world, to all the gourmet coffee world. So, we've already seen agroforestry coffee come the champion of Brazil, winning the best coffee of Brazil the year before last. All right. And that's a big breakthrough, just friends of ours, doing the best they can and going out there and winning the national championship. But it really is down to, obviously, so like I was saying, the processes of planting it. We've been talking about planting and processes in all our videos. So I'm not going to go back from seed to harvest. We're going from harvest to cup. So, if you can do the specialized drying, right? Because this is where you can ruin your coffee, where you can actually gain extra notes. Already we've got good coffee. We've planted it in interesting processes, organically, with a lot of organic matter. So it's already a coffee with a lot of value, nutritiously and flavor-wise. But now you can make or break your coffee. From now on, from after you harvest, this is where you can make or break your coffee. So, if you put it out in the sun and it dries too quick, and if you really want to go into it, you've got all these fermenting techniques. You put it in tanks, and you leave it there, and you measure temperatures and things like that, and that's really next level even. But a basic good quality system is just dry it in the shade. All right, we like to leave it for about a 30-day period. People, when they really keen, they measure it. We're talking about 11% humidity in the bean. So people are really keen at that, but we're talking about 30 days. How I like to do it, I leave it at about 22, 23 days, like a 3-week period. And after most of it's already dehydrated, put it into a sack and close it off. So that becomes, the uneven dehydration, where some are more drier than others, when you close it in a sack, it spreads out that humidity and it becomes more uniform again. So you can make the humidity more uniform once you close it up, and then anyone that's actually too wet or too dry, it just makes it all uniform, because inside that sack the humidity becomes all one, and then that makes it all homogenic again. And then I bring it out for another week and let it air out, and then just that final dry, and then it's nice and dry, 30-day dry. 30 days out, 1 week in the bag, maybe 4 or 5 days in the bag, and then out for another week, things like that. All right. So this is another opportunity. So ideally, we're not picking green beans, but we do know that in reality, green beans pass, because it's just because of the sheer volume. And then this is the opportunity, when you layer it all down, to really pick out those green beans. You really got to come back and pick out those green beans. They say that up to 3% of green bean is enough to ruin your coffee altogether. Okay, and if you haven't got a very large harvest, production, this is an opportunity for you to make the best out of it. You can really like take the time to take those green beans out and make the most out of your small harvest, added value on that. So this is the opportunity where we're really looking through and, you know, trying to identify any green beans that might have passed. I've done this already. There's no green beans here. I won't even have 1% of green bean in this plot here. So that's a bit of the processes. All right, I could have, you know, a different variety, or, you know, a more, you know, fruity variety or whatever, but if I don't do this right, it all goes to the bin. Or, you know, I could have just a standard variety. This is Katwai, red Katwai. We have some yellow Katwai planted that's in the loop to come through. Katwai is just pretty standard. Everyone kind of plants around here Katwai. And then, you know, you could look for something more gourmet, but, you know, the championship winning coffee was Katwai. So it wasn't, you know, any specific grain that made it. It was the care in the field. It was the care in the drying processes. And then it goes to, you know, the roasting processes, which is where, you know, you can really kill everything there. So each process you go through, you can kill years worth of work. I like to think of coffee as like, you've planted it, someone has planted it, someone has looked after it for 3 years, you know, and then they've harvested it, you know, 3 or more years, and then they've harvested it, you know, and then you can ruin it here. You can ruin, like, you know, a whole 5 years worth of work. You can just ruin it there. And then if you don't ruin it in the dry, you can ruin it when you roast it. And if you don't ruin it when you roast it, the worst of them all is ruin it in the cup. Like, you know, you've gone through all the right drying processes. You've gone through all the correct processes. In the roasting, you've got a specific roaster with, you know, really that light roast. So you don't want to kill off your coffee there. You want to be able to feel the flavor. So it needs to be really lightly roasted. And then, you know, you've produce this beautiful coffee, and then someone just burns it in the last minute just before going into the cup. You know, all that enriching processes, and someone just burns it just before it goes in a cup. That's why we're from here going to the kitchen and talking about burning the coffee, and let's brew some coffee to make sure that you get your best coffee from harvest to cup. All right, guys, we're in the kitchen now, so excuse any of the mess that you might see around. So something that's really key is to get the right proportion of water versus powder. Right, it's very important this. You know, ideally we want the water to travel through that powder in a certain amount of time. If it takes too long, you know, if the water is in contact with the powder for a long period, there's a few things that can happen. Firstly, you know, that first jet of water that passes through the powder extracts all the sugars, all the minerals, all the vitamins, all the quality stuff from the coffee, you know, basically the gold. The first jet of water that comes out is basically the gold. And then, you know, as more water travels through, and then, you know, that last bit of water is actually extracting impurities, and it's actually extracting, you know, more caffeine and other, you know, maybe you desire caffeine, but, you know, other undesirable stuff as towards the end, you know, for that powder that's already extracted the gold, and then it comes through the B rate and the C rate stuff. So ideally, you don't want too much water passing through the powder. You want just the right amount of water. So we would like to really prepare the amount of water that we're going to be drinking. You know, we're a couple here, so we get 2 mugs, we fill it up, and this is how much water we're going to use, we're going to consume. So there's no point in me putting extra water if I'm not going to consume, because I'm just going to be, you know, extracting impurities towards the end and mixing it all up with the gold. All right. If you got your water too hot, you know, if it's in more contact, it means it's burning for a longer period. If the water is in contact with the powder for a longer period, and that water is too hot and it's actually burning the coffee, you know, if you've got it there burning for 30 seconds, it's one thing, but if you've got it burning, you know, the grain for like 2 minutes, it's a whole next ball game. All right, as well. So, I mean, so it needs to travel fast through. You know, ideally we're talking about 30 to 40 seconds worth of water traveling through the powder. This is all just technical stuff. So what does that mean? It means I've got 2 mugs worth of water here for the amount of powder I'm going to put in. Now, if I wanted to make 3 or 4 coffees, you know, so here I've put 2 portions of coffee for 2 portions of water. Now, if I wanted to make 3 or 4 coffees, would I just put 3 or 4 portions of powder? No, because I can't scale up like that. Because once I've got 3 or 4 portions of powder, you know, it slows down. It takes too long for that water to travel through those 3 or 4 portions worth of coffee. So it just takes too long, and then you're bound, inevitably you're gonna extract some bad quality stuff as well. So I like to think of it that you can only make quality coffee 2 at a time, and it's not a coincidence that coffee machines, espresso machines, maximum do 2. In espresso coffees, you get that first jet and you get all the gold out. That's why it's so short. That's why them short espressos are the best, because you just get the gold out. And as you get those longer espressos, you get the gold, and then you get the B, and then you get the C rate stuff, and then you get all that burning information. And it's really 99% of espressos in the world are really burnt. And people make a misconception that espresso coffees is really strong, and it's not really strong at all. It tends to be really burnt when it's not well made, and we know 99% of espresso coffees aren't properly made in these machines. So what we have is totally burnt coffee, and we associate burnt coffee taste with strong coffee taste. Well, this coffee is really strong, but people are so accustomed to putting sugar in, so they get the burnt coffee and they put the sugar in, and then it's fine again, because you put the sugar in and you kind of pretend that your coffee is not burnt. That's just basically 99% of all coffees around the world is like that. So if you acquire the taste where you're not putting sugar in, you're really quite key to make your coffee properly, so you're not drinking burnt coffee with that false burnt, that false strong feel to it. So if you dig that, you get the caffeine. If you at the later stage, where the water travels through the powder, at a later stage, the last water brings in the caffeine. So if you have a short coffee like an espresso, you don't get to the point where you're extracting too much caffeine. Only the gold comes out. All right. That's why when they do those Americanos, people, they put the espresso coffee in, and then they add water. And some, uninformed baristas, they actually, put the full amount, the full jug worth of, pressed water through the coffee. And that means you get really high amount of caffeine on that when you get really long espressos and things like that. All right. I don't know if I made myself clear on that. So let's get down to the practice, and then we'll talk about it as it goes along. So I'm gonna put 2 portions of water. That's gonna go to the fire. I can already take the opportunity, excuse me, while I'm here. So for 1 mug worth of water, I put 1 spoon's worth of coffee. Not like a very high mountain, but it's not very thin either. So it's just 1 spoon, a nice, say, medium height worth of coffee, all right, for each mug. Okay, so like I said, I couldn't go ahead and put 4 times that. Even if I had 4 times more water, it'd just be too much coffee and it wouldn't travel through quick enough. All right, so let's get this in the stove. All right, so we've got that water on the stove there. We've got the heat is on. And what we're looking for here is the right temperature not to burn the coffee. Look, your finger is a perfect temperature meter. If it's too hot for your finger, then it's too hot for the coffee. If you're unable to leave your finger there for over 3 seconds, it means it's too hot for your finger, it's too hot for your tongue, it's too hot for the coffee. All right, so this is a good way to measure. Like I said, if it's burning your tongue, then it's burning the coffee. And you can see those bubbles starting to build up on the side of the tin. Can you see the bubbles just on the side where it's not actually bubbling in the middle yet? That is another indicator of more or less when your water should be, at the right temperature. But ultimately, if it's gonna burn your finger, it's gonna burn your coffee. So I like just putting my finger in there, and that's hot enough. Okay, so we're gonna get this, and we're gonna take it over to our station here, and we're gonna brew the coffee. All right. Now I appreciate that people really like really hot coffees. Okay, and I appreciate that this is the correct temperature to be in contact with the coffee, but you lose temperature as it goes through, and you lose temperature as it hits the mugs, because the mugs could often be cold. They could often be actually cold as the material, so that's going to lose temperature. So if I wanted to, if that was the case, then I'll put an extra couple of fingers of water there, so that I could heat up these mugs, you know, with that water. Or say, also a nice good trick is, say I've just passed a little bit and it's just a little bit too hot, the water. I could actually cool down the water, distributing it to the mugs, and then actually bring it back, you know, so you've brought the temperature down of the water to the right, you know, temperature we'd like to have going through the grain. But we've also heated up the cup so that when the coffee goes into the cup, we're not losing temperature, you know, so we're actually able to drink the hot drink. This is certainly hot drink. I mean, it's not bubbling, but it's certainly hot drink. I estimate this to be anything from 75 to 90 degrees. All right, we like to think of that max 90 degrees. All right, so we're gonna go ahead now, and this is how I like to do. So we just gotta pass that water through the grain. It's the right amount of water for the right amount of powder for the right number of cups. All right. And look at how interesting it is. See that first jet? That's the best. So I'd like to share that. You know, otherwise that's cheeky. Otherwise, you know, I could decide to have the better cup than the wifey, or vice versa. So I like to, you know, give a bit of the quality there, get a bit of the quality there. All right. Keep that water rolling. Ideally, you have it, you know, just stable, and give it back there. So everyone has a bit of the best. Everyone, the type A, everyone has a little bit of the type B, and everyone has a little bit of the type C. So, you know, as you move that around, yeah, that's how I like to do it. So guys, I mean, technically, this is pretty correct. You know, barista style, technically, obviously this is not an espresso machine, but this is how you do, you know, a nice filtered coffee. But I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying technically. And obviously this is how you can appreciate the best sugars and flavors out of the grain. If you're sure not to burn it, you know, not to get that water too hot, so you don't burn that coffee. However, when it comes down to, you know, food and beverage, taste is everything. So, you know, I'm not saying it's wrong. If you like to have a burnt coffee, if you appreciate that, if you enjoy, if you have pleasure on drinking burnt coffee with added sugar, that's fine. If that's giving you pleasure, so this is an important thing when we're talking about food and beverage. Can't tell you it's wrong. We're saying technically, this is how you get the best sugars, you know, low level of caffeines and less impurities and things like that. But you know, as always, whatever gives you pleasure, you know, if it suits you, we'll be happy with that. All right, so, you know, if you have any more doubts about coffee, drop it down in the comment. You know, if you haven't checked out our Patreon community, that's pretty cool. You know, it's a way of you supporting us as well. It's as from $7.90 a month. You can be supporting us through the Patreon community, and then you be involved in the Q&As, and we're always thinking of extra bonuses for the Patreon community, you know, webinars and things like that go on behind the scene there. So, you know, that's the best way you can support us and get a little bit extra. If you want another step, if you want some personal consultancy for your agricultural plot out there, we're down with that as well. Okay, just get in touch either through the Facebook or Instagram or anything like that. We'll be getting back to you on that. All right, so, you know, let us know, thumbs up, thumbs down, let's talk about it. I know there's lots of different techniques of coffee brewing. This is just pretty basic and guaranteed to have a nice drink. There we have it. Till next time.